Hello, I'm going to talk to you quickly about the Anglican Church. Let's get started. First, I will talk to you about the origin and beginnings of Anglicanism, and then I will present its impact on the territory and other religions. I will end by talking briefly about the Anglican Church in the present day. The majority religion in England was for centuries Catholicism. The religious trend that we know in this country today, however, and which for many years set it apart from the rest of the world, is Anglicanism. It was established in England and Ireland at the beginning of the English Renaissance by King Henry VIII. Also, the establishment of this new Church of England was intended to bring together the faithful and unite the citizens. It only gave rise to constant changes in the legislation depending on the heirs to the throne. As a source of disagreement and instability in the country, the Anglican religion was slow to become synonymous with peace and serenity in the territory. While Anglicanism is still in force in the country, it is possible to ask what major steps it went through before achieving a peaceful society. The word Anglican is said to have its origin in medieval times. Indeed, it comes from the Latin expression Ecclesia Anglicana, dating from 1246 and meaning English church. A term rarely used before the 16th century, it was customary to speak of Church of England, whether in legislation or in everyday life. In contrast to continental Europe, where the Church separated from the papacy mainly as a result of theological disputes, the Church of England separated as a result of religious consideration. Indeed, after his marriage to the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII, King of England and Ireland, who had until then been very pious and showed his devotion to the Pope on a daily basis, soon wanted a son in addition to his daughter Mary. However, his wife was unable to give him this due to numerous miscarriages. The king therefore wanted to have his marriage annulled. Henry VIII brought a request before the Pope, arguing that Catherine of Aragon, before she was his wife, was married to his elder brother, who had died. His main argument was that they had all spent at least one wedding night together and that according to an ancient law, which theologians had helped him to find, marriage is forbidden with a person whose brother has already been disposed. The Pope refused this marriage annulment. Henry VIII had an English ecclesiastical court vote to annul his marriage. The annulment was finally and swiftly pronounced by the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, in order to break his unfortunate union with Catherine of Aragon. This led to the excommunication of the king. But Henry VIII didn't stop there. He decided to free himself even more from papal authority by proclaiming himself supreme head of the church and clergy of England, and at the same time married his mistress, Anne Boleyn. The Anglican Church was born. However, the creation of the Anglican Church didn't immediately lead to the desired effect in the country. It was not until 1559 that the religious situation stabilized. Anglicanism generally took shape. After the death of Henry VIII, the founder of the Anglican Church, he was succeeded by his son Edward VI. Also, his son was a Calvinist. He tried to follow in his father's footsteps. It should be noted that he was crowned at the age of 9. He died before reaching the age of the majority, so a regency council ruled the country throughout his reign. After the death of the young Edward, it was Mary I who ascended the throne. She was the first queen to rule directly over her own country. Unlike her brother, Mary Tudor was Catholic. Also, she declared shortly after her coronation that she would not impose her religion on her subjects, she made her reign a struggle against the persecutions of Catholics. Deeply attached to her Catholic roots and in complete disagreement with the Anglican Church established by her father, Mary succeeded in having Henry VIII's religious laws repealed, even bringing the Church of England under the jurisdiction of the Vatican. The Queen died at the age of 42, taking with her her dreams for Catholics and the acceptance of Roman authority over the English Church. Elizabeth I then became the queen. In order to end the chaos, a revolution was launched overturning all the religious laws of Mary I and reinstating those of Henry VIII and Edward VI. The re-establishment of the authority of the English Protestant Church at the expense of the Catholic Church, which her half-sister Mary I had promoted as the sole state religion, was one of the first decisions taken by Elizabeth I, the last member of the Tudor dynasty to reign on the English throne. Part of the territory, including the counties which remained predominantly Catholic, had difficulties in accepting the new rules. To this end, changes were made to relax the requirements and make them acceptable to all. Nevertheless, the supporters of Catholicism continued to feel persecuted, perhaps with a good reason. Indeed, the Catholics had already lost so much and made so many sacrifices that these few concessions had no impact. As its true symbol of Anglicanism, it was under the reign of Elizabeth I that the Book of Common Prayer was fully introduced. Considered as one of the instruments of the Anglican Protestant Reformation, it brings together all the prayers, formulae, and practices of the churches of the Anglican Communion. Sister churches were established in Scotland and Ireland. Anglicanism then began to be exported. From the point of view of the other religions, they began to live in better harmony when, from 1829 onwards, when the Act of Supremacy was adopted for the Catholics. These advances did not, however, ease tension in their entirety. Under Elizabeth I, legislation began to be passed on the conventions of the kingdom subject to Anglicanism. Over the next 2 centuries, numerous repressive laws against non-Anglican subjects of the realm and mostly against Catholics were passed. They took away the rights of a whole section of the population while persecuting them. It was a Roman Catholic Relief Act that the Catholic Communion found itself almost on an equal footing with the Protestant Communion. Catholics were then again entitled to be elected to the parliament, to vote in elections, to obtain employment in the civil service, the judiciary, the army, etc. However, some restrictions are still applied to the Catholic communities. They are still denied access to the throne. Jesuits cannot wear their religious habit in public. Their community cannot take in new members. Also, it took a few years for the impact of the Roman Catholic Relief Act to be felt. It did allow Catholics to live in the open as the Church came out of a semi-clandestinity and gradually began to rebuild itself. The fear of repercussions remained for a long time in the minds of believers who expected the act to be overturned at any moment and new waves of persecution to follow. The real effects were therefore only seen in the long term, as the emergency of an entire population from the shadow took place in small steps. The cohabitation with other religions was quite different. First of all, it should be noted that other religions were already much more of a minority than the Catholic religion. The Jewish religion, for example, was imported into the United Kingdom into the 11th century by William the Conqueror. In England, the Jewish communion was accused of using murderous rituals. So the massacre of the Jews began and measured were taken to distinguish them from the rest of the population and especially from the followers of the Anglican Church. Mostly persecuted at a time when Anglicanism was still the norm in the country, Jews, like Catholics, were deprived of many rights under the Tudor dynasty. Like the Catholics, the Jews obtained a new situation, new rights, and finally a new place in the society in the middle of the 19th century. Today, the Book of Common Prayer is still the foundation of the Anglican Church. The version used in the United Kingdom is considered less anti-Catholic and is not practiced with respect for others. However, the book has been revised many times, both in the UK and in the many other countries in which it's used. Indeed, Anglicanism really began to spread around the world with colonization. Nigeria, Uganda, and India are the three countries with the most Anglicans in the world after the UK. It's now estimated that the Anglican Communion has nearly 18 million adherents worldwide. In addition to being well established in some former colonies, Anglicanism has conquered the United States. There is known as the Episcopalian Church, and it organized around 19th century. As in most European countries, Anglicanism seems to be attracting fewer and fewer faithful. Indeed, this is the case for the majority of religions in the cities and countries considered more developed. The population is concentrating on what is considered to be more down to earth, when today's majority of the population is atheist and does not believe in any form divine. England is no exception to this trend, and families, mainly urban, are losing interest in religion. The link between the royal family, which is still very influential in the country, and the Anglican religion nevertheless has an impact in the whole of British society. Indeed, just before her marriage to Prince Harry, her fiancée, Meghan Markle, was baptized, albeit discreetly. This reminds the majority of English people that the roots of their culture are Anglican, prompting some to take an interest in religion or even to be baptized themselves. Queen Elizabeth II's era also has a significant impact on the thinking of her people. The Queen is therefore taken as model on all levels, and religion is no exception. Her way of seeing things, her way of thinking, and her attachment to the English church are mimicked by a whole section of the population for whom the Queen, symbol of England, remains and will remain the model to follow. Thus, England has had a turbulent past in terms of cohesion and understanding of the different communions. Before Henry VIII came to power and decided to reform the church, the kingdom was very close to the Catholic Church of Rome. However, with the establishment of the Anglican Church and the separation of the territory from papal authority, the persecution of all those who didn't want to adhere to Anglicanism began. The absence of a clear and above all constant regulation didn't allow for social stability either. The various persecution, sometimes of Catholics, sometimes of Jews, depending on the ruler in power under the Tudor dynasty, caused great imbalances and profound instability, both societal and economic. Within its own communion, groups formed as ideologies diverged. This led to three branches of Anglicanism that we know today: the High Church, the Low Church, and the Broad Church. The conquest of new territories around the world and the colonization of new continents, whether in America, Africa, or Asia, led to the expansion and transmission, more or less violent, of Anglicanism around the world. Today, Anglicanism is practiced in 117 countries, although it represents barely 200% of the world's faith community. In addition to United Kingdom, countries such as Nigeria, India, the United States of America, and Canada have allowed Anglicanism to survive. The attachment to values and history of their land of such leading figures of country as royalty, most notably the current Queen of United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Elizabeth II, allows the territory to continue to practice the religion that its land were born into at a time when religion's space seems to be less and less relevant.